All right, so now let's talk about the Bill of Rights. So remember that the Bill of Rights is a compromise between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists in order to get a supermajority of states to ratify the U.S. Constitution. The Bill of Rights encompasses the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, of which there are currently 27. It lists our freedoms, rights, and protections from the federal government and guarantees rights and powers to the states. So let's go through the amendments. The First Amendment is the very first of the bill and the Bill of Rights. It guarantees several freedoms. You're probably familiar with the freedom of speech, but there are more than just the freedom of speech in the First Amendment. The first is the freedom of religion. So you have the right to practice any religion you like in the United States of America, and the United States of America cannot establish a religion. They can't say that all Americans are Christian, or all Americans are Protestant, or Catholic, or Muslim, or anything like that. You have the right to practice whatever religion you like, and you cannot be tried or convicted or arrested for practicing whatever religion you choose. The next is the freedom of assembly, so you can peacefully protest. If there is a policy that you want to see changed or something you don't like, you can go to the General Assembly or DC or wherever, and you can protest. You can make your voice heard. Now, you can't riot. There is a difference. Protesting is peaceful. Rioting tends to be, breaking things, destroying things, stealing things. You can't do that, but you can peacefully protest. You have the right to do that. Freedom of the press. So the press can, by and large, publish anything they like. There are some restrictions to that. Freedom of petition. So you and your friends can come together and you can draft a petition that says we think XYZ should change, and everybody can sign it. And yippee, maybe something will change. You do have the freedom to the right to create petitions. And finally, we have the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech does not give you the right to say anything you like. There are restrictions on the freedom of speech, but pretty much anything political you can say, and all of the restrictions generally hover around public safety. So you couldn't go into a movie theater and say, there's a fire, because ultimately that's going to lead probably to people storming out of the movie theater. Maybe people get trampled. It's going to endanger the public. So most of the speech restrictions in the United States are about public safety. One of the really big controversies over the last, 50 years has been flag burning. Is it constitutional to burn an American flag? And the Supreme Court has ruled that it absolutely is. You can burn an American flag if you choose to do so. The Supreme Court has worked very hard to limit restrictions to the freedom of speech, but there are some restrictions, and again, most of them are about public safety. Second Amendment is the right to keep and bear arms. This has been a very controversial amendment over the past 10, 15, 20 years with the uptick in school shootings. The Supreme Court has ruled that there are restrictions to owning firearms in the United States, but they've largely left those restrictions up to the states themselves to determine what those are. Big issue a few years ago was over pistols, handguns. Do you have a right to own a handgun? Can a state say, no, you're not allowed to own a handgun? And the Supreme Court ruled that, yes, you do have a right to own a handgun. That was the D.C. Heller decision. But generally, again, the Supreme Court has left it in the hands of the states to make that call about firearms. Third Amendment is about quartering soldiers. So in the American Revolution, let's say you're a farmer, you've got your nice little farm, you got some tobacco growing over on the side, and all of a sudden these British soldiers walk in and they say, we're sleeping here for the next however long we want to sleep here, you've got to feed us, you've got to give us drink, enjoy. That was quartering soldiers. That is banned by the Third Amendment. So the U.S. government cannot force you, a private citizen, to house and feed and supply their soldiers. Fourth Amendment bans unreasonable searches and seizures without probable cause or a warrant. So a police officer cannot break into your house, look for whatever, and then walk out and use it against you. It doesn't work like that. They would have to have evidence that there is evidence of your crime in your home, and then they would have to go to a judge. A judge would have to sign a warrant, which is a piece of paper that basically says you, the police officer, can go search their home. Then they can search your home, then they can look for things and potentially arrest you. But they can't just break into your house. They have to have a warrant from a judge. There's a lot in the Fifth Amendment. The first is that you must formally be charged with a crime. So you cannot be arrested and then you ask, why have I been arrested? And then them say, oh, we're still trying to figure that out. It doesn't work like that. They have to have a reason to arrest you, which takes us back to probable cause, which we'll talk a lot more about in the Law and Justice Unit. You do not have to self-incriminate yourself. So they can't take you into the courtroom and say, did you do X, Y, Z? And you can say, I plead the Fifth Amendment. So you don't want to lie, but you also don't want to say, tell the truth, because then that would incriminate yourself and then basically force you to go to jail. There is no double jeopardy. So once you've been tried in a court of law, they can't try you again. Over on the right, you can see a ad for a very awful movie about double jeopardy. Came out in the late 90s. But anyway, double jeopardy is all about you cannot be tried more than once for the same crime. Eminent domain. The U.S. government, under certain circumstances, has the right to force you to sell them your property. So like, let's say they wanted to add an extension to 64, Highway 64. If your house is right in the middle of that extension, the U.S. government can force you to sell them your house, your property, so that they can build a highway. Finally, we have due process of the law. And again, we'll talk about that more when we get to the Law and Justice Unit. But basically, there is a process by which the U.S. government must follow in order to, that starts with arrest and ends with ultimately sentencing and then you getting put in prison or jail or let go. But there is a process they must follow that they cannot deviate from. So, the Sixth Amendment is all about trials. You have the right to a speedy trial by an impartial jury. So they can't arrest you, throw you in jail, leave you in there for 3 years, and then try you. No, you have a right to a speedy trial. Notice there is not a hard number on here. It just says speedy because speedy is as fast as they can get to it. And then the jury must be impartial. You can't prove 100% by a shadow of a doubt that a jury is impartial, but both the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney have the right to question the witnesses or question the jury and try to get an impartial jury. You have the right to question witnesses against you, so they can't call a witness up, then tell some lies, and then they disappear. You have a right to question that witness as well, and you do have a right to an attorney, and if you can't afford it, the government will provide you one for free. Seventh Amendment is right to a civil trial by a jury. Generally, I would say civil trials, they just have judges, and the judges just make the decisions, but you have the right to call for a jury if you would like one. There's a big difference between civil trials and criminal trials, which we will talk about when we get to, once again, the Law and Justice Unit. The Eighth Amendment is protection from excessive bail. So if you go into a Walmart and steal a flat screen TV, they can't give you a bail of $3 million because that's excessive. That doesn't make any sense. They also ban cruel and unusual punishment. What cruel and unusual punishment means has changed significantly since the Eighth Amendment was put into place. Back in the day, they used to hang people. Then they decided that that was cruel and unusual punishment. Back in the day, they used to put people in the electric chair. Then they decided that that was cruel and unusual punishment. Now, some states use the gas chamber, but most don't. A few states will do injections. They will do death by like a drug, an injection. But a lot of states don't even have the death penalty anymore. So what cruel and unusual punishment has changed substantially since the Eighth Amendment was ratified along with the rest of the Constitution. The Ninth Amendment basically says that other rights may be given even if not written in the Bill of Rights. So if it doesn't say you can't in the Constitution and it doesn't say you can in the Bill of Rights, you should have that right. Pretty straightforward. An example would be the right to privacy, which is very controversial actually if we think about our Google searches. But we'll talk about that later. And finally, we have the 10th Amendment, which reserves all other powers to the states. So basically, if the Constitution doesn't say it's a federal power, and the Bill of Rights doesn't say it belongs to a person, then it's up to a state to regulate. And this is where the Second Amendment regulations come from, because the Second Amendment isn't super clear and specific about what the right to keep and bear arms means, and they've left it up because of the 10th Amendment to the states to make that call by and large.